Hello, everybody.
And welcome to my Northwind Masterclass. We're redoing the melee weapon guide, and this time we're going to include every single one of them. Before we begin though, I need to explain a couple terms. So first off, in this video I measure hits per stamina bar. This means exactly what you'd think it would. If I say a tomahawk has 6 hits per stamina bar, I would be able to swing it 6 times before fully depleting my stamina. Secondly, I am basing all of these measurements off of colonist stamina bars. Natives get 25% more stamina than colonists do, so take that into consideration. Now let's get to weapons. So the first of the melee weapons is the stone knife. Knives in general are classified as utilities, so they go in your utility slot instead of your melee slot, but they're handheld and they do damage, so I include them all here anyway. Now, stone knives are only craftable by colonists in the colonist crafting menu. If you don't know what that is, press C on your keyboard to pull it up. Stone knives do 20 damage and have 9.5 hits per stamina bar. After the stone knife comes the regular knife. These are craftable at the St. Paul Anvil or purchasable in Maria Clark's shop. Regular knives do 20 damage and have 9 hits per stamina bar. After these two colonist knives come the 3 native knives. Native knives are craftable through the native crafting menu, which you open with the C key. But keep in mind though, only natives can craft these. This knife, in specific, the tribal knife, does 20 damage and has 9 hits per stamina bar. This knife, the tribal blade, does 20 damage and has 9 hits per stamina bar. And this knife, the ritual knife, also does 20 damage and has 9 hits per stamina bar. Next up are the treasure knives, of which there are 2. These knives are only obtainable through claiming treasure chests. The more common of these treasure knives is the short glaive. The short glaive does 20 damage and has 9 hits per stamina bar. The less common of the treasure knives is the ancient dagger. The ancient dagger also does 20 damage and has 9 hits per stamina bar. And last but certainly not least is the superior knife. Superior knives are tier 2 hunting contract rewards. You have to get them by completing hunting contracts, and I go over how to in my tiered rewards video. Now, superior knives are special for a number of reasons. Primarily though, they're the only knife we have discussed so far that's completely unlootable. The other ones you'd have to ensure to protect. Now, superior knives do 25 damage while using that same 9 hits per stamina bar. This means that they are a 4-hit kill and the only viable knife on the list. If you have to use a knife in combat, make sure it's a superior knife. Next, I'm throwing the bayonet in just because it's knife-related. Bayonets can be purchased or crafted at St. Paul. They can then be mounted on a Charvel, Brown Bess, or Springfield musket to act as a melee on the front of your primary. Bayonets do 50 damage and have 3.5 hits per stamina bar. They're not very good right now, so I don't really suggest you use one. And now to the first melee weapons that are, actually classified as melee weapons. This here is a stone hatchet. It's crafted in the colonist crafting menu. Stone hatchets deal 25 damage with 7 hits per stamina bar. Additionally, like all other hatchets and tomahawks, they can be thrown with the F key. When thrown, they deal 65 damage. However, be cautious when throwing weapons though, because your enemy can just pick them up and throw them back at you. The second hatchet type, the tribal hatchet, is the native variation of the hatchet. Natives craft this in their crafting menu. Natives are also given unlootable and unthrowable versions of this same tool at the start of the game. Now, these hatchets are like multi-tools. They can harvest rocks around the native camp and cut down basic trees. Native hatchets have identical stats to their colonist counterparts as well. They deal 25 damage, 65 damage when thrown, and use the same 7 hits per stamina bar. After all these hatchets comes a special weapon, the tribal club. Tribal clubs are crafted in the native crafting menu as well. They have the same basic stats as the 2 hatchets above, with 25 damage and 65 damage thrown, but they also have one additional ability. Clubs have a random chance to temporarily knock players unconscious when they're hit with them. Unconscious players will ragdoll for a couple seconds before standing back up. In that time, you can move in and kill them because they're just lying there motionless on the ground. To balance this, the devs made the club's swing speed much slower than the other hatchets, and they also nerfed the club's stamina usage to 6 hits per stamina bar. We shall now move on to our first tomahawk, the tribal tomahawk. Tribal tomahawks are crafted in the native crafting menu. They do 25 damage, 65 damage thrown, and have 6 hits per stamina bar. The next tomahawk is the colonist variant, and it's just called the tomahawk. These are the first good weapons we've got to today. Tomahawks are crafted at the St. Paul anvil. Rather, colonist variants of the tomahawk are crafted at the St. Paul anvil. These do 30 damage, 70 when thrown, and use 6 hits per stamina bar. The two final tomahawks are the treasure chest tomahawks. You can only get them by opening treasure chests. The first of these, the war axe, deals 30 damage, 70 when thrown, and uses 6 hits per stamina bar. The second of these, the Labrie's axe, also deals 30 damage with 70 thrown and 6 hits per stamina bar. So now here come the swords. Swords obviously cannot be thrown like the hatchets and tomahawks can, but they are still viable weapons. They're especially good for new players learning how to fight. So, the quickest hitting sword, the backsword, is another treasure chest weapon. Backswords deal 30 damage with 5 hits per stamina bar. Although they hit very fast, backswords are basically just worse tomahawks, so I do not recommend using one. After backswords come cutlasses. They are made at the St. Paul anvil and do 40 damage with 5 hits per stamina bar. A more refined version of the cutlass is the saber. Sabers are also made of the St. Paul anvil and do 40 damage with the same 5 hits per stamina bar. Our final entry into the sword category is the falchion. These fancy treasure chest weapons are slow as boarding axes, but they make up for it with 45 damage instead of 40, being the highest damaging sword in the game. Falchions use 5 hits per stamina bar, just like the rest of the swords. So next up come our spears and pikes. This first one is the stone spear. These are crafted in the colonist crafting menu, and they're actually throwable. The stone spear does 25 damage, 65 damage thrown, and uses 6 hits per stamina bar. After the stone spear comes the ritual spear, a native weapon. These are crafted in the native crafting menu. They do 25 damage, 65 damage thrown, and use 6 hits per stamina bar. After the ritual spear comes the tribal spear. These are also native crafting menu items, and they do 30 damage, 70 damage thrown, and have 6 hits per stamina bar. After the tribal spear comes the final tribal polearm, the tribal pike. Tribal pikes are made in the native crafting menu, and they do 35 damage, 75 damage thrown, and have 5 hits per stamina bar. Additionally, they are slower than all of the other spears to balance out their increased damage. We now move back to colonist weapons with the boarding pike. The boarding pike is not throwable. It is crafted at the St. Paul anvil, and it does 40 damage with 4.5 hits per stamina bar. Now, there's something special about the boarding pike. It has the longest reach of any weapon in the game. To balance this out, however, the devs made it slow like the tribal pike we just described. The next colonist pike is the great pike, which is also unthrowable. These are crafted at the St. Paul anvil, and they do 40 damage with 6 hits per stamina bar. Great pikes have pretty small reach, but they make up for it by using so little stamina and being so fast. And then finally we have the long spear, another unthrowable colonist weapon. Long spears are tier 1 hunting contract unlocks, and they do 40 damage with 4 hits per stamina bar. Long spears are pretty lame. Alrighty, and now to round out the night we will go over the axes. These are the slowest weapons in the game, but they also do the most damage. So first up is the tribal war axe, the only native axe on the list. This is crafted in the native crafting menu, and it does 50 damage with 2.5 hits per stamina bar. After that comes the colonist variant, the boarding axe. These are made at the St. Paul anvil, and they do 70 damage with 2.5 hits per stamina bar. Then comes the broad axe. These are unlocked as a tier 1 woodworking contract reward, and they do 75 damage with 2 hits per stamina bar. And then last but certainly not least is the esteemed great axe. Great axes are crafted again at the St. Paul anvil, and they do 80 damage with 2 hits per stamina bar. I'm joking, by the way, great axes are very shit. Apologies for the poorly done rushed edits. This information took forever to compile and condense into a video, and quite frankly I'm exhausted. It's 31 weapons. As always, please share this information with new players because it's the new players that need it most. And keep in mind that the devs change weapon stats every update, so don't be surprised by any statistics that are slightly off if you're watching this video in the distant future. If you spot any stats that you think are incorrect, test them and send me proof of it. I'll update the description to include any incorrect information. This is my Discord if you want to DM me them.